In downtown Minneapolis, right by the new billion-dollar football stadium, stands a homeless community. The residents named it the Wall of Forgotten Natives. What started last spring as a few campers with sleeping bags has now grown into a full-blown tent city. The community is made up of almost 200 indigenous children, pregnant mothers, and others. But the crisis grows even more complex, with conflicting reports about drug addiction in the community, an unclear timeline for moving the homeless to a more permanent shelter, and dire winter weather quickly approaching. Watching the Hawks host Tabetha Wallace was there just this week and spoke with members of the community.
Minneapolis, Minnesota has a population of approximately 422,000 people, with a 2018 annual budget of over $1.5 billion, with $24 million allocated for affordable housing. This comes just 2 years after the completion of the U.S. Bank Stadium, the new home of the Vikings football team.
It can comfortably sit over 66,000 football fans. It was made possible by about $350 million from the state of Minnesota and approximately $150 million from the city of Minneapolis for the billion-dollar project. The Super Bowl that was held here just last year netted the city over $370 million. But for the people here at the tent city, known as the Wall of Forgotten Natives, they wonder where all that money could have gone.
Because just a mile from the billion-dollar stadium is an encampment of between 150 and 200 tents housing almost exclusively members of the indigenous peoples of Minneapolis and their families.
The encampment first came to my attention. It was really through the conversations I had with my staff back in probably mid-July, when there was maybe like 4 or 5 tents here. Early August was really when it started to get more attention, I think, in the both in the community but also within the city and the county, because the tent city or the encampment grew very rapidly. One week it was 4 tents, next week it was 40 tents, and the next week it just kind of proliferated.
And while many news reports falsely claim that the majority of the camp were people with opioid addictions that had been evicted from public housing, our investigation found that only about 25% of the residents are there due to opioid addictions or drug arrests. Frank Perro, National Information Coordinator for the American Indian Movement, explains.
Currently what's going on right here now is what we call the Wall of Forgotten Natives. Got over 165, close to 200 tents up and down this 3 or 4 block area. They've been out here a couple of months, bringing attention to homelessness of American Indians in their own homeland.
For many, coming here to be with their people instead of sleeping in cars or under bridges is a step up and gives them a sense of community that isn't always possible when suffering from homelessness, especially when you're a member of an oppressed people.
Tabetha Wallace, co-host of Watching the Hawks, is here with me for more. Thanks for being here, Tabetha.
Thanks for having me.
So you were there just this week, and some of these people who own cars actually prefer to live in this community with the tents. What was the sense that you got from being there?
Well, one of the things is that being together in that community was safer. One of the biggest issues you have with being homeless is either getting hassled by the cops because you're not supposed to be living in your car, and also your belongings. So for these people, you have multi-generational families, and what they felt is that at least being with people in their community, they can keep each other safe and keep at least that area safe for the people that are in their family.
And there are people, there are police there kind of overlooking and seeing, and some are even volunteering. You touched on a little bit on drug addiction and some people living in the camp, and there's even been one official confirmation of a drug overdose. What are these police officers doing to keep it safe? I know that even some people who need medication and medical help are scared to leave the property because they think that their belongings will get stolen.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the hard parts about living in that kind of situation. The upside is that there are a number of clinics, and then one organization that really has been sort of overseeing the encampment since it began is called Natives Against Heroin, and what they have is a group of people who are trained with Narcan in case someone does. They've had a number of overdoses. Part of it is having Narcan available, having treatment facilities available, and getting people there. But as I said, right now it's trying to get people into some sort of permanent housing, a more permanent situation. And then the other side of it is the community themselves keeping drug dealers out. And there's definitely, and the police themselves are helping to sort of keep certain elements from coming back into the camp. And I spoke to one officer, and the thing that sort of touched him was that the children that are there are sort of getting used to the situation. You know, kids are resilient.
Right. Kids feel like they're a part of the community and enjoy playing with other kids. I mean, they're innocent people who don't know really what the fact of the matter, what's really going on. So this community of the Forgotten Wall sits just south of the billion-dollar stadium that was built just a few years ago in Minnesota, in Minneapolis for the Vikings. Homelessness is not a crisis just there. It's a nationwide crisis. In California, for example, Salesforce CEO is calling out other billionaires who have been driving up the cost of living, for example, in San Francisco. There's a new proposition in the city of San Francisco, Proposition C, which is a proposed law that would tax businesses that earn more than $50 million a year, an average of 0.5% on gross receipts. This could bring in anywhere from up to $300 million to help the homeless. If this proposition passes, could we see other businesses following suit?
I think so, and I think one of the things that you're going to have to see is that these businesses are going to have to start paying more in taxes, because the money is going to have to come from somewhere, most likely a federal government source. And we're seeing, you know, immigrant housing. We need more elderly housing, and one of the things is we need housing for the Native Americans. They've been pushed just to the end of their ropes, I think, and this is what you're seeing is centuries of colonization. But these are people with families and lives and hopes and dreams, and I'd like to see, you know, our government and everybody sort of come together to show that pride and
hopefully these billionaires can and
yes,
you know, work toward getting these people off the streets.
Absolutely.
Host of Watching the Hawks, Tabetha Wallace, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Sarah.